I call it a drug. Rhymes with Grug. I call this Pompeii because it rhymes with Grug. I call it gambling away my children's college funds. Rhymes with Grug. I call this Hiroshima 'cause it rhymes with Grug. I call it vehicular manslaughter 'cause it rhymes with Grug. I call it the killdozer. It rhymes with Grug. I call it kidnapping 15 children and putting them in my basement 'cause it rhymes with Grug. I call it a forest fire. Rhymes with Grug. I call it the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Rhymes with Grug. I call it murder. Rhymes with Grug. I call it blowing up the second tower. Rhymes with Grug. I call it Mark IV aerial bomb. Rhymes with Grug. I call it running away from child support. Rhymes with Grug. I call this an atomic bomb. Rhymes with Grug. I call it a rocket launcher. Rhymes with Grug. I call it kidnapping. Rhymes with Grug. I call it Pearl Harbor. Rhymes with Grug. I call it flint and steel. Rhymes with Grug. I call it robbing a bank. Rhymes with Grug. I call it starting a nuclear war. Rhymes with Grug. I call it cheating on your diet. Rhymes with Grug. I call it mental rehab. Rhymes with Grug. I call it 9/11. Rhymes with Grug. I call it Star Wars. Rhymes with Grug. I call it world domination. Rhymes with Grug. I call it illegally crossing the border. Rhymes with Grug. I call it burning my ex's house down. Rhymes with Grug. I call it escaping federal prison. Rhymes with Grug. I call it World War II. Rhymes with Grug. I call it a Diddy party. Rhymes with Grug. I call it a concentration camp. Rhymes with Grug. I call it Riz. It rhymes with Grug. I call it a thug. Rhymes with Grug. Hey, that actually does rhyme.